Good evening. I think we're going to get started. First, let me thank you for coming to this panel on building mosques in New York City and welcome you. And I want to tell you that this event is sponsored by the Faces of God Lecture Series, which has the mission here at Wagner to foster interdenominational dialogue. The Faces of God series is sponsored by a generous gift from Mrs. Qualden, and we try to have events like this on campus each year. Tonight's panel here is a dialogue. We would like to encompass contemporary controversies and religious practices and beliefs, as well as reference these controversies to the changing religious prejudices that have been a hallmark and colored the history of New York City. For example, the anti-Catholicism or papism that was a hallmark of this city in the 1850s and 60s. So we have a referent, a historical referent, we have contemporary issues, and a few facts. We don't really know right now the number of Muslims who are in the United States. Estimates range from 5 to 8 million, but because of immigration, because of people not wanting to necessarily be public about what their views are, we don't really know. What we do know is that the number of mosques in the United States has increased by 25% over the past 5 years, and that there are currently over 1,200 mosques across the United States. Given this is an important panel to be having. Understanding and dialogue, given the numbers of people we're talking about, is central. So Wagner is happy to be sponsoring this evening. We have recently redesigned our chapel to accommodate Hindi and Muslim students on campus and to facilitate on a very personal level an interdenominational dialogue. As an institution of higher education, we are really seeking to broaden understanding this evening. There are no issues that are going to be decided this evening. This is not a community board. This is a forum for us to come together and learn from each other. Toward that end, I want to speak to you a little bit about the format this evening, and then I'll introduce our panelists. We have culled together 4 questions for our panelists, and we sent those questions to them earlier today. Each panelist will be given 5 minutes to respond, and we'll hold up a card letting you know when we have 1 minute left. We'll be given 5 minutes to respond, and after all 3 panelists have spoken, we will open the floor up and we will take 2 questions. And I want to emphasize that we will take questions from the floor. We're at this stage not interested in opinions which speak to any of the comments by our panelists. After we get through our questions, we will open the floor up. So if you have things you'd like to add to this conversation, if you have questions that don't get answered, please hold them to the end and we will get to them. Okay, let me introduce our panelists. First, I'd like to introduce Jane Eisner in the center. Jane became the first female editor of the Jewish Daily Forward in 2008. Before the Forward, she worked at the Philadelphia Inquirer in various capacities for 25 years. She is currently the Koppel Fellow in Journalism at Wesleyan University, where she's taught journalism and nonfiction writing. Prior to this, she was a senior fellow at the University of Pennsylvania's Robert A. Fox Leadership Program, and she published Taking Back the Vote, Getting American Youth Involved in Our Democracy in 2004. To her right, your left, is Abe Greenwald of Commentary Magazine. Abe is the associate editor of Commentary Magazine, and his work has appeared in Forbes, American Spectator, the New York Post, the National Review Online, the Weekly Standard website. And at the far end, on Jane's left and your right, is Haroon Magul of the Meiden Institute. He is the executive director of this consulting and communications project, which is devoted to enhancing understanding between Muslims in the West. He has an MA and a Master's of Philosophy from Columbia in Middle Eastern Studies, South Asian, and African Studies. And his first novel, The Order of Light, was published by Penguin in 2006 and translated to French the following year. So please join me in welcoming them, and we'll begin. The first question, and I guess we'll start with Jane, but this question will go to all panelists, is what does Park 51 mean to you? And this question is intended not only literally, what's happening, but symbolically or metaphorically.
Well, thank you, Laura, and thank you to Wagner for putting together this really important dialogue. I suppose the reason I'm here is that my newspaper and website has written a great deal about the controversy of the proposed Islamic Cultural Center near Ground Zero. We first started covering this back in May, and that was the first time that I wrote an editorial about the Islamic Cultural Center. I also wrote another one a few months later. Our position has been really clear about this, I think. We feel that the center has every right to be there, and that in fact it's a good thing for America. That doesn't mean that we are not mindful of the sensitivities and fears, well-founded fears that many people have. We believe especially that the families of victims of the terrorist attacks on September 11th, that their feelings ought to be respected. But we can't make public policy based on feelings. The Islamic Cultural Center passed through all the requisite zoning requirements, was almost unanimously approved by the community board in May. I believe the vote was 29-1, has been supported by the Manhattan Borough President, the Mayor of New York City, state senators, and other local officials. It was really just a local zoning dispute until a few people from Washington and Alaska and other places like that got involved. And I think it needs to remain something that the people of that area are the first to be able to say what they want to have in their community. Yes, Ground Zero is a site of national and I hope international significance, but we can't lose sight of the fact that there's an office building being built right on the grounds of Ground Zero. People are going to go to work there in a few years. They're going to make telephone calls and shop and argue with each other and conduct commerce and do all the ordinary things that people do. This Islamic Cultural Center is planned for several blocks away. It will not disrupt life in Ground Zero. My understanding is that there's a magnificent memorial being planned for underground, and I think the sacredness of that site and the lessons that we need to learn from what happened will still be able to be transmitted. But we are a nation that's based on pluralism and on tolerance. I thought it was very important for a Jewish newspaper to speak out about this. It was not that long ago that synagogues were not being permitted to be built in America. We can't lose sight of the times when our people were discriminated against. And I think it's really important that we stand up for other people who are being discriminated against now. So those are our reasons. I fully respect and understand the feelings on the other side. And I understand that this can be hurtful to people. But we have to overcome our hurt, and we have to say that as a society, here's how we respond to awful things that happen. We respond by calling upon the best of ourselves, reaching out to people who are trying to reach out to us. Remember, this is a cultural center. Yes, it has a mosque in it. Also, it's going to have a swimming pool and auditorium and touristy things and all sorts of things that are going to happen, like the JCC Manhattan and like the 92nd Street Y. A mosque was just going to be one part of this building. There's a mosque in the Pentagon. We're not afraid of that, are we? We can't be afraid of these kinds of things. We really, really have to search for the common ground here.